The hum of the servers was my constant companion, a white noise symphony to the intricate dance of algorithms I orchestrated. For 10 years, I, Evelyn Reed, had poured my lifeblood into Veridian Dynamics, a burgeoning AI development firm. My official title was Lead AI Architect, but in truth, I was the heart of their cutting-edge natural language processing NLP division. My team and I had just completed the final integration of Echo, an adaptive learning AI designed to revolutionize customer service interactions. Echo wasn't just a project. It was my magnum opus. Years of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled breakthroughs compressed into lines of elegant, self-optimizing code. Veridian Dynamics had always prided itself on its family atmosphere. Richard Thorne, the CEO, was a charismatic visionary, or so he seemed. He'd often walk through the labs, shaking hands, offering encouraging words, and occasionally, it's a surprisingly insightful technical question that hinted at a deeper understanding. My relationship with Mark Jensen, the Chief Operating Officer, was less overtly warm, but professionally sound. Mark was all about efficiency, a numbers man who respected results, and Echo was poised to deliver unprecedented results. Sarah Jenkins, the head of HR, was the kindly face of corporate policy, always ready with a sympathetic ear and a promise to look into it. A promise that, as I would soon learn, meant absolutely nothing. The initial success of Echo was intoxicating. Internal simulations showed a 300% improvement in resolution times and a 90% customer satisfaction rate. The board was ecstatic. Whispers of an imminent IPO, propelled by Echo's groundbreaking potential, filled the air. I was promised a significant equity stake, a promotion to Chief AI Officer, and the resources to build out a dedicated research division. Richard personally congratulated me in a company-wide email, praising my unparalleled brilliance. For a fleeting moment, I believed it. I believed in Veridin. Then came the restructuring. It started subtly. My access to certain project management dashboards was revoked. My regular sync meetings with Richard became less frequent, then disappeared altogether. My team, once directly under me, found themselves reporting to Mark Jensen's operations division. I questioned Sarah Jenkins, who offered vague reassurances about streamlining processes and optimizing workflows. My gut churned, but I pushed it down, attributing it to pre-IPO jitters. The hammer fell during the quarterly board meeting. I arrived, prepared to present Echo's public launch strategy, only to find my name conspicuously absent from the agenda. Instead, Mark Jensen stood at the podium, presenting my research, my data, my projections. He spoke of his team's tireless efforts in developing Echo, crediting innovative operational efficiencies for its success. Richard Thorne sat beside him, nodding sagely, his gaze never meeting mine. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. It was a hostile takeover. After Mark's presentation, a slide flashed on the screen. New leadership, Echo Division. Mark Jensen, Chief AI Officer. My protests were met with polite, unyielding dismissal. Richard, finally acknowledging my presence, offered a condescending smile. Evelyn, we appreciate your contributions to Echo's early development. Your foundational work was invaluable. However, for a product of this scale, we need a leader with a broader strategic vision. Mark has demonstrated exceptional capabilities. In this regard, my foundational work. I choked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I built Echo, every line of code, every neural network configuration. It was my design, my vision. Such passion, Evelyn, Sarah Jenkins interjected, stepping forward with a practiced, soothing expression. But leadership transitions are always difficult. We have a generous severance package prepared and a non-compete clause. Of course, given the sensitive nature of your involvement with our proprietary AI, a non-compete. For the technology they had just stolen from me, the audacity was breathtaking. They weren't just taking my promotion and my equity. They were attempting to sideline me from the industry I had dedicated my life to. They were stripping me bare, professionally and financially. The severance package was a pittance, barely enough to cover a few months' expenses. Certainly not enough to fund a protracted legal battle. The next few days were a blur of numb despair. I tried HR again, armed with countless emails, JIRA tickets, and commit logs proving my authorship. Sarah Jenkins listened patiently, then informed me that company policy dictates that all intellectual property developed on company time, using company resources, belongs to Veridian Dynamics. She added with a sickeningly sweet smile that my disruptive behavior was becoming a concern. I consulted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Anya Sharma, recommended by a former colleague. Anya reviewed my contract, the non-compete, and the overwhelming evidence of my contributions. Her assessment was grim. Evelyn, on paper, it's a tough fight. Your contract is ironclad. Veridian has deep pockets and a formidable legal team. They'll bury you in discovery. Your best bet is to negotiate a better severance. But even then, the non-compete will sting. So they just get away with it. I whispered the injustice, a bitter taste in my mouth. They steal my life's work, destroy my career, and walk away clean. Anya paused, her eyes softening. Not necessarily clean, Evelyn. Just not legally accountable in a way that benefits you financially. There are other ways to win, but they're not always found in a courtroom. Her words resonated. The humiliation, the betrayal, the crushing weight of seeing my legacy appropriated by a grinning fraud like Mark and a duplicitous opportunist like Richard. It festered. I thought of my parents who had sacrificed so much for my education, their pride in my accomplishments. This wasn't just about money. It was about vindication. It was about reclaiming my identity, my worth, and sending a clear message. You don't steal from Evelyn Reed and get away with it. The initial pain transmuted into a cold, hard resolve. I would not just survive, I would thrive. And in doing so, I would ensure Veridian Dynamics, and specifically Richard Thorne and Mark Jensen, reaped the whirlwind they had sown. Anya's words, other ways to win, echoed in my mind, a seductive whisper against the despair. My initial attempts at official resolution had been a humiliating farce. HR was a corporate shield, legal a financial black hole. I realized then that my fight wouldn't be waged in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the shadows of the digital realm, the very space I commanded. This wouldn't be about proving my case to a judge. It would be about exposing their truth to the world. My first step was a strategic assessment. I compartmentalized the problem. Richard Thorne, the orchestrator of the betrayal, driven by greed and a desire to consolidate power. Mark Jensen, the opportunist, a mediocre talent elevated by theft. And Veridian Dynamics itself, the corporate entity that facilitated and benefited from the crime. Each required a different approach, unique vulnerability to exploit. My leverage points were clear. Echo's codebase. I knew its intricacies better than anyone. K had left subtle, almost invisible. Markers of my ownership within the sprawling architecture, digital breadcrumbs that could point back to me if triggered. More importantly, I knew its actual vulnerabilities, not the ones tested by Veridian's superficial QA, Veridian's internal systems. As lead AI architect, I had deep access, not just to the NLP division, but to the broader network, including financial records, executive communications, and compliance documentation. While my direct access had been revoked, I had laid a subtle digital trap months ago. A backdoor designed for rapid prototyping and emergency fixes known only to me. It was a risky, ethical gray area. But the game had changed. Key personnel, who else at Veridian might know the truth, or at least harbor resentment towards Richard or Mark? There were engineers on my old team, longtime employees, even some junior executives who might have felt sidelined. The research phase began. My tiny apartment, once a place of rest, transformed into a clandestine operations center. I bought a burner laptop, secured a VPN, and went dark. My focus: finding the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of their malfeasance, and the Achilles heel of Echo itself. I started by reconstructing my tenure at Veridian, compiling a meticulous timeline of every project, every meeting, every email exchange related to Echo. I cross-referenced this with public news about Veridian, investor reports, and industry rumors. I looked for patterns, discrepancies, anything that hinted at a larger scheme. My most crucial tool was my hidden backdoor into Veridian's systems. It was a subtle, highly encrypted connection designed to mimic routine network traffic. Through it, I began to passively monitor internal communications. I wasn't looking to disrupt anything yet. I was simply listening, gathering intelligence. It was like sifting through digital detritus. Searching for forgotten whispers, I quickly discovered that Mark Jensen's operational efficiencies were thinly veiled attempts to cut corners on Echo's development. He was rushing the public launch, pushing for aggressive deployment targets and ignoring critical stress tests and security protocols I had insisted upon. This wasn't just incompetence. It was reckless disregard for the product's integrity. It was essentially building a house on a shaky foundation, unaware of the structural flaws beneath. Simultaneously, I began skill development. My expertise was in AI, not digital forensics or corporate espionage. I immersed myself in cybersecurity protocols, learning about data exfiltration, network penetration testing, and anonymous communication. I studied corporate law, focusing on intellectual property rights and whistleblower protections. I understood that if I was to expose them, I needed to protect myself from their retaliation. This included creating multiple layers of digital anonymity, setting up dead man's switches for data release, and establishing untraceable communication channels. My first target wasn't Richard or Mark, but a secondary antagonist, David Chen, Veridian's lead counsel. David was a sniveling, by-the-book lawyer who had been instrumental in drafting the oppressive non-compete clause and dismissing my complaints. He was a small fry but connected to the larger machinery. My revenge against him would be a test. Run away to refine my methods and gauge Veridian's response. Through my back door, found a trove of emails between David and an external consulting firm, detailing a dubious scheme to quietly reclassify some of Veridian's older, less profitable intellectual property as legacy assets and sell them off at a significant undervaluation to a shell company. This wasn't illegal, but it was highly unethical and would undoubtedly upset shareholders. It also reeked of Richard Thorne's fingerprints. My plan for David was simple: leak the internal communications about this legacy asset scheme to a disgruntled junior paralegal I knew still worked there, anonymously, of course. Let her see the injustice, and if she had any backbone, let her expose it internally. The obstacle, as always, was Veridian's formidable IT security team. They were good, perhaps. Not world-class, but competent enough to detect amateur breaches. My method had to be subtle, untraceable. I used a series of nested proxies and anonymized servers to deliver the information, making it appear as an internal leak from an anonymous employee. The leak worked. Within days, I saw internal emails flying, David Chen scrambling, and whispers of an internal audit beginning. This was a minor victory, but a crucial one. It showed me my methods were sound. It also validated Anya's earlier hint. Other ways to win, but the real challenge lay ahead. While Mark was cutting corners, Richard Thorne was moving fast. Public relations campaigns were ramping up, hyping Echo's capabilities. Investor calls were scheduled. The IPO date, I learned through my surveillance, was being aggressively moved up. They were racing against something, perhaps against the very vulnerabilities I was uncovering. One night, sifting through encrypted communications between Richard and an offshore holding company, I stumbled upon a fragmented audio file. It was heavily distorted, but I recognized Richard's voice. He was talking about expediting the data migration and overriding the older verification protocols. My heart pounded. Older verification protocols. That could only mean one thing. He was moving Echo's core learning models from the secure, sandboxed environment I had built to a less secure legacy system, likely to cut costs or speed up deployment. This was not just reckless, it was a potential catastrophic security breach waiting to happen. The models contained sensitive customer data, proprietary algorithms, and unreleased IP. This was Veridian's soft underbelly, their fatal flaw. The fragments were enough. I now knew not only how they betrayed me, but how they were going to continue to betray their customers and investors. My revenge wouldn't just be satisfying, it would be a public service. The fragmented audio file, combined with Mark's reckless push for an expedited launch, solidified my strategy. My revenge would be multifaceted. Hitting Richard and Mark where it hurt most, their carefully constructed public image and Veridian's perceived infallibility. This wasn't just about destroying them, it was about exposing the rot at the core of their operation. My plan coalesced into 3 distinct, interconnected phases, each designed to escalate the pressure and reveal a deeper truth. My first move was to leverage Echo itself. Richard and Mark believed they had stolen my AI. They hadn't considered that the architect might have left a few digital tripwires. During Echo's development, I had incorporated a rarely used, deeply nested debugging protocol, a fail-safe against unforeseen system anomalies. This protocol, Aegis, was designed to, under specific conditions of system stress and data inconsistency, automatically trigger an internal audit log of all data migrations and protocol overrides. Critically, Aegis also had a fail-safe. If its audit log detected significant data integrity issues or unauthorized protocol overrides, it would automatically generate a detailed report and, in a worst-case scenario, flag external regulatory bodies if internal channels failed to address the issue within a predefined timeframe. It was a digital deadman switch for corporate ethics, a feature I'd built in for a nightmare scenario. My preparation involved creating the precise conditions to activate. This meant subtly introducing corrupted data packets into the new, less secure legacy system where Richard was moving Echo's core learning models. The corruption would be minor enough to bypass initial security checks, but significant enough to trigger Aegis's internal integrity scan. I'd crafted these packets to mimic a distributed denial of service DDoS attack from a compromised third-party vendor, deflecting suspicion from myself simultaneously. I needed to ensure my digital footprint remained untraceable. I refined my knowledge of Tor networks and cryptocurrency transactions for any necessary payments to anonymous data brokers or consultants. I also developed a series of chaff operations, creating decoy digital activities, fake job applications, harmless forum posts, innocuous network probes to distract Veridian's IT security team while my real work unfolded. My second target was Mark Jensen. He was the public face of the theft, the one now basking in the glory of his AI. My aim was to expose his professional incompetence and his blatant disregard for quality control. My research had revealed a consistent pattern of mark cutting corners, pushing unrealistic deadlines, and overriding critical security protocols to meet aggressive launch targets. This wasn't just limited to Echo. I'd found evidence of similar shortcuts in previous, smaller projects he'd overseen, leading to significant post-launch bugs and customer dissatisfaction. Conveniently buried by Veridian's PR machine. My plan was to leak this pattern of negligence to a specific, highly respected independent tech journalist, Eleanor Vance, known for her investigative prowess and unyielding integrity. I would provide her with anonymized but highly detailed documentation, internal emails where Mark dismissed security concerns, redacted bug reports from previous projects, and, most damningly, the audio snippets I'd found of Richard and Mark. discussing expediting data migration, and overriding older verification protocols for Echo. I would package this information with a clear narrative, highlighting the potential risks to Veridian's customers if Echo launched prematurely with such compromised security. Asterisk. The final phase was the most critical, the public reckoning for Richard Thorne. He was the architect of my downfall, the one who had orchestrated the entire charade. My goal was to undermine his reputation, expose his greed, and reveal the truth behind Veridian's facade. My research into Richard had unearthed a tangled web of offshore investments and shell corporations. It wasn't explicitly illegal, but it certainly raised questions about his ethical leadership and commitment to shareholder value. More importantly, I had found a crucial clause in Veridian's IPO prospectus, Clause 37, which stipulated that any significant undisclosed operational risks or material misrepresentations regarding intellectual property ownership before the IPO would result in a mandatory hold on the offering and an immediate internal investigation by an independent third-party auditor, potentially leading to the CEO's removal. This was my golden ticket. My strategy was to coordinate the activation of Aegis with the leak to Eleanor Vance. The corrupt data packets I'd injected would trigger Aegis's internal audit log. As Aegis flagged the irregularities and prepared to report, I would also trigger the release of the comprehensive dossier to Eleanor. Her article detailing Mark's negligence and hinting at deeper issues within Veridian would create a public outcry. This would put immense pressure on Veridian to respond, likely with dismissals and denials. But the real strike would come when Aegis, facing an unresolved internal alert from my injected data, reached its pre-programmed threshold and, as designed, automatically escalated its report to the regulatory bodies overseeing corporate governance and intellectual property. The report, generated by Veridian's own AI, would detail the unauthorized protocol overrides the compromised data migration and the underlying integrity issues of Echo's deployment. It would be irrefutable proof coming from within their own system. This, coupled with the growing public scrutiny from Eleanor's article, would force the independent audit mandated by Clause 37. Asterisk, the main obstacle was Veridian's internal security. They were certainly looking for me, or at least for the source of the David Chen leak. I had to be patient, precise, and undetectable. Another challenge was the timing. The IPO was fast approaching. My window of opportunity was narrowing. I also had to contend with the moral implications of my actions. Was I destroying Veridian, a company I had once loved, simply for personal revenge? The answer was always the same. I wasn't destroying it. I was exposing its fatal flaws. True destruction came from within, from the hands of Richard and Mark. I tested my methods meticulously. I created virtual sandboxes mimicking Veridian's network architecture, practicing the data injection, the timing of the triggers, the anonymized communication. I ran simulations, identifying potential points of failure and refining my approach. As the IPO date loomed, I executed my preliminary moves. I sent an anonymous cryptic email to a few disgruntled junior engineers in Mark's new Echo division, hinting at imminent data integrity issues and advising them to check their logs carefully. This wasn't to expose anything directly, but to sow seeds of doubt, to ensure that when Aegis did its work, there would be internal witnesses. My finger hovered over the execute command. The plan was meticulously crafted, the risks calculated. It was time to unleash the Echo. The days leading up to Veridian's IPO were a whirlwind of nervous anticipation. My apartment, illuminated only by the glow of multiple monitors, felt like a command center on the eve of a major offensive. The air crackled with a silent tension. My first move was the most delicate, injecting the corrupted data packets. I had meticulously crafted them to mimic routine network traffic, but with a subtle, insidious flaw. On the pre-dawn hours of Monday, 3 days before the scheduled IPO, I initiated the sequence. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a symphony of commands executed with surgical precision, the packets disguised as routine customer interaction data slipped past Veridian's perimeter defenses and began to propagate through the compromised legacy system where Richard had moved Echo's core learning models. The system initially absorbed them, a ripple in a vast ocean of data. But deep within, the subtle corruption began to coalesce, slowly, inexorably, triggering the first stages of Aegis's internal integrity scan. I watched the telemetry data on my screen, a series of green lights indicating successful packet delivery. There was no immediate alarm from Veridian's side, a testament to the sophistication of my digital ghost. The next morning, I initiated Phase 3.2, the unmasking of Mark. I composed a meticulously worded, untraceable email to Eleanor Vance, attaching the anonymized dossier of Mark Jensen's past negligence, the redacted bug reports, and the incriminating audio snippets. The subject line was concise, impactful, Veridian Dynamics, hidden flaws. The Echo AI's compromised launch. I knew Eleanor would act swiftly. Her reputation was built on breaking such stories. The escalating conflict began immediately. By midday, news of Eleanor Vance's expose hit the tech press like a digital meteor. The headlines screamed, whispers of negligence plague Veridian's Echo AI ahead of IPO. Mark Jensen's checkered past raises concerns for Veridian investors. The articles, citing anonymous but clearly well-informed sources, detailed a pattern of rushed projects, ignored warnings, and a blatant disregard for security protocols. The financial markets reacted instantly. Veridian's stock, already riding high on IPO fever, dipped sharply. Richard Thorne and Mark Jensen were forced to issue a hasty damage control statement, dismissing the article as unsubstantiated rumors and malicious attempts to destabilize a groundbreaking company. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, within Veridian's network, Aegis was working its magic. The corrupted data, combined with Mark's previous protocol overrides, had triggered a critical alert. Aegis, designed for just such a scenario, had logged a severe data integrity issue and an unauthorized system override. Its internal audit log was generating a comprehensive report, detailing the chain of events leading to the compromise. Then came the twists and reveals. Just as the public outcry against Mark was peaking, a new internal alert from Veridian's IT security team, triggered by Aegis, began to circulate among senior management. It wasn't about an external hack. It was about an internal system anomaly, a critical integrity breach within Echo's core learning models. The report, generated by Echo itself, was undeniable. It pointed directly to the unauthorized migration and protocol overrides that Richard and Mark had orchestrated. I watched from afar as the panic began to ripple through Veridian. I saw frantic internal communications, emergency meetings scheduled, and the IT security team scrambling to identify the source of the anomaly, unaware it was Echo itself, fulfilling its design. The climax arrived in the form of the final confrontation. As Veridian's stock continued to plummet and the regulatory bodies began to send preliminary inquiries, Aegis reached its final threshold. Its internal resolution timer expired. Without further human intervention, and precisely as I had designed it years ago, Aegis, through a secure, pre-programmed channel, autonomously submitted its comprehensive report to the relevant regulatory agencies, specifically the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) and the Intellectual Property Office. The SEC, already alerted by the market volatility and Eleanor Vance's article, moved swiftly. Within hours, news broke. SEC halts Veridian Dynamics IPO pending investigation into AI data integrity and IP ownership. The press release explicitly cited concerns raised by an internal automated audit system within Veridian Dynamics Core AI. Along with the ongoing public scrutiny, Richard Thorne and Mark Jensen were caught in a trap of their own making. The internal automated audit system was Aegis, my creation. Now their undoing. The regulatory agencies, armed with the irrefutable data from Echo itself, launched a full-scale investigation. The board of directors facing the specter of massive lawsuits, reputational ruin, and a collapsed IPO convened an emergency meeting. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the survival of Veridian Dynamics. I received a single, cryptic email from Anya Sharma, my lawyer. The next morning, check the news. The headlines were glorious. Veridian Dynamics CEO Richard Thorne resigns amidst SEC investigation. COO Mark Jensen terminated. Internal AI system exposes Veridian's data malpractice. IPO halted indefinitely. The satisfying resolution unfolded rapidly. Richard Thorne, under immense pressure, resigned to pursue other opportunities, a thin veil for his forced removal. The second investigation expanded, uncovering more of his questionable financial dealings and the true extent of his deception. Mark Jensen was fired, his career in tech utterly destroyed. The narrative shifted from my supposed disruptive behavior to their systemic fraud and negligence. The irony was delicious. They had stolen my AI, my Echo, to propel their ambition, only for that very AI, through my foresight and planning, to become the instrument of their downfall. The justice was proportional. They lost their positions, their reputations, and their ill-gotten gains. Veridian Dynamics, while scarred, would survive, forced to clean house and rebuild its trust. The silence after the storm was profound, almost deafening. The frantic hum of my multiple monitors had ceased, replaced by the quiet hum of my own satisfaction. Richard Thorne and Mark Jensen were gone. Their empires crumbled, not by an external attack, but by the very systems they had sought to exploit and the meticulous planning of the woman they had betrayed. The immediate consequences for Veridian Dynamics were severe but necessary. The IPO was officially withdrawn, causing significant financial losses for early investors and a severe blow to the company's valuation. However, the SEC investigation, fueled by Aegis's irrefutable data, led to a deep clean. Veridian's board, desperate to salvage the company, publicly apologized, initiated a full internal audit, and appointed a new interim CEO with a mandate for transparency and ethical conduct. There were whispers of a major reshuffling, a cultural reset. I knew the core engineers, the good people who genuinely believed in the product, would now have a chance to rebuild. For Richard Thorne, the downfall was complete. Beyond his resignation, the SEC investigation unearthed a series of dubious financial transactions and attempts to manipulate Veridian's valuation, all tied to his offshore holdings. He faced potential legal ramifications beyond just corporate misconduct, his name now synonymous with corporate greed and unethical practices. Mark Jensen, stripped of his undeserved title and exposed as professionally incompetent, found himself persona non grata in the tech industry, his career a smoldering ruin. The poetic justice was undeniable. He who had stolen the credit found himself utterly discredited. My own position was complex. I was an anonymous hero, a digital phantom who had exposed a corporate conspiracy. The legal implications of my actions, specifically using the backdoor access, were ethically gray, but practically unprovable. Anya Sharma had been clear. They can't prove it was you. And even if they could, the public sentiment and the SEC's findings would heavily favor the whistleblower exposing fraud, not the company trying to silence them. My digital breadcrumbs were too subtle, my methods too layered. The moral resolution was the most profound. There had been moments of doubt, flashes of fear, and the gnawing question of whether revenge would truly bring satisfaction. What I discovered was that it wasn't the act of destruction that brought closure, but the act of reclamation. I hadn't destroyed Veridian, had purified it, hadn't just harmed Richard and Mark, I had simply held them accountable to the truth of their actions. My conscience was clear. I had fought for justice, not just for myself, but for the integrity of innovation and for the countless engineers whose work is too often appropriated by those at the top. The professional vindication was perhaps the most unexpected outcome. While my identity remained officially anonymous, the tech community, buzzing with theories about the Veridian AI whistleblower, began to put pieces together. My name, Evelyn Reed, previously recognized for my AI expertise, was now whispered, in hushed reverent tones among those who understood the technical brilliance required to orchestrate such a takedown. Headhunters driven by curiosity and a desire for truly disruptive talent began to discreetly reach out, offering unprecedented opportunities. One such offer came from a prominent venture capital firm, known for funding ethical, innovative startups. They were looking for a chief technology officer for a new venture in AI ethics and responsible development. The offer was staggering, not just financially. Complete creative control, a substantial equity stake, and a clear mandate to build a company where integrity was paramount. It was a chance to build something new, something mine. Free from the shadows of betrayal, my personal closure was a slow, quiet process. The anger faded, replaced by a sense of calm power. I had proved my competence not just as an AI architect, but as a strategic thinker, a survivor, and an agent of change. My story, though untold in full, became a silent legend in the digital undercurrents of the tech world. The final satisfaction was seeing Veridian Dynamics, under new leadership, slowly begin its arduous journey of rebuilding. They removed Mark Jensen's name from all Echo-related documentation and publicly acknowledged foundational contributions from unnamed early architects. It was a small concession, but a symbolic one. My Echo, tainted by their theft, was now being reevaluated, resecured, and finally being readied for a launch built on integrity, not lies. I accepted the CTO position. My new office, overlooking a bustling city skyline, felt like a fresh start. No longer Evelyn Reed, the betrayed engineer. I was Evelyn Reed, the architect of my own destiny, a quiet force in the world of technology, ready to build, innovate, and ensure that justice, in all its forms, could always find a way to echo through the digital realm. The story of Veridian Dynamics was a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that in the interconnected world of technology, true ownership and ethical conduct would always eventually find their way to the surface. And sometimes, the most elegant code wasn't just about function, but about justice.